Transportation, Regulatory Concerns, and Future Generations now convenes this hearing. In accordance with the open government law, public notices were sent to the media on Thursday, July 31st, 2014, and again on Tuesday, August 5th, 2014. For the record, today is Friday, August 8th, 2014. The time is now 10:03 in the morning. The committee has invited representatives of the Department of Revenue and Taxation to continue further discussion on the following items. We're going to be starting with online services, followed by the Department of Revenue and Taxation seizure and auction of real property, and closing off with some clarifications on the gross receipts taxes. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge my colleagues present here today, my Vice Chairman, Senator Tom Abbott, to my immediate right, and to his immediate right, our Vice Speaker, B.J. Cruz. To my immediate left is Senator Elinia Mashida. Thank you all for joining me this morning. If I may request the Sergeant at Arms to please swear in the attendees this morning. Thank you, Tom. Good morning, John. Good morning, Benita. You know, in our last oversight hearing, we covered these three topics, and we wanted to come back again to be able to get more information on them. And I want to start out by saying that I'm very, very disturbed. I'm very disturbed because in our hearing in February, when I asked about the online services, I was told April 30th was going to be the deadline. When we came back in here in a couple weeks ago, I was told that it's going to be the end of the year that's going to be the deadline. And when I asked what was the rationale for why the online services was getting pushed back so far consistently, I was told that it's the vendor that's the issue. And I've come to find out that that is not the case at all. The vendors never got payment. The purchase order here that you guys cut was the day after our last oversight hearing. And the project summary from the vendor says that basically now that they've received the purchase order, now they can begin doing it, and it's going to take 6 months to roll out. So when you guys were testifying before the committee over the course of the last year saying that the delays were due to the vendors, it was actually due to the fact that Rev and Tax never actually procured the system.
Basically, during those times, we were communicating with our vendor. They were basically giving us dates that they would like to work on the online payment. But as time moves on, they I guess they ran into some problems getting the online services, in which I think later on it was discovered that a certain vendor has the payment online service that they have to clear. So that's probably what was the biggest holdup, is that again there was a vendor that already has the online payment, and then that kind of like stalled for some time, and at the end they said, the only way we can do this is we have to start over. And I guess in more detail, I probably could ask my deputy, because she was more involved in the process and the communication with the vendor. If you want to add more to that, Marie.
Yes, thank you. Okay, what had happened back then, even in January, they were still communicating. Initially, it was the legal aspects, and then it became the technical. So we didn't get the quote until sometime in May or June. So yes, we were correct in stating that the vendor is looking into how he was going to implement the online system. So in between that, all that was happening. So we just finally got the quote in May or June, I'm not sure. And then I guess the PO just finally went out 2 weeks ago. But prior to that, they were working with, the two vendors were working together to see how they were going to make it happen. And in order to make a quote, you need to find out exactly what you need to do. So that was ongoing on our last oversight.
And to add that, I numerously made, work with my IT person in regards to this online payment. I put the emphasis that we really need this thing, and it just eventually there's so many delays, and at least right now we have something rolling, and I guess we have a PO that says that you'll be doing first part of January, but they're going to look at it and see if they can do it even before the end of the year or as early as possible. So that's my last discussion with the vendor.
Yes.
So,
And then I'd also like to add that I believe the PO was sent a month prior to it being approved or something like that. Or the quote, the PO was dated the day after, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so we finally got the PO, we finally got his quote, and now here's where we're at. So they're moving forward with it. But it did take a while for them to negotiate, find out what was needed, and move forward.
Yeah, but see, in our last hearing, what was communicated to the committee was that the reason why we were being delayed was because the vendors were having issues about delivering the service. But at the time of that hearing, you guys already knew that a quote was provided and a PO was being processed. But the testimony wasn't that we're pending payment to a vendor to get the service delivered. The testimony was the vendors are not delivering and you don't know the exact details as to why. And so in that hearing, I made the statement that we're going to call the vendors in here and have them answer for it. And the day after that hearing, you guys issued your PO. And when I got in touch with the vendors, they said that they're pretty much ready to go. So, I feel like the committee was misled into believing that the vendors were the issue, when in fact, the vendors had already provided the quote, and it was just the government that needed to cut the PO for the services to start getting implemented.
Okay, no, we apologize for that lateness. It wasn't any intention. I believe what happened was our staff just didn't move that PO quickly. But we were aware that, they needed, they submitted the quote.
Okay. Well, I am glad that we have the PO. It means that we're finally going to get it turned on, but I am disappointed that we didn't move it faster, because now, as you stated in our last hearing, based on the project summary, it is going to take 6 months for them to turn this thing on. So our people are going to wait until January to be able to get their online services. One of the reasons why we've been bringing this up over the course of all of our oversight hearings throughout this term was to try and get this thing turned on as quickly as possible.
Yes, understood. Yes.
So we're here. I mean, there's nothing I can't go back in history, or I can't go back in time, and I guess we will await this come January. I'm glad the PO's issued. I'm glad we have something to look forward to. I wish it could have happened faster, but I guess this is just this is the way it's going to work with us. We're going to just constantly hit these bumps in the road and get better and better over time. So I'm glad we're moving forward on other items. I think we need to expedite a little bit more. Did anybody have any questions concerning the online services, Vice Speaker Cruz?
Well, I'm just trying to get clarification, because when I read the 2013 audit that was released on July the 2nd, it stated in the document, in the audit for 2013, that the Department of Administration is currently working on implementing our own transaction system, which will go live July 2014. DOA, TPS, and DRT, TPS will soon interface to the AS400 on a daily basis. In addition, DOA has implemented additional quality controls. So, as of July the 2nd, the auditor and from representations made by you guys thought that it was going live last month.
No, I think that's DOA, correct?
Yeah, but it says the DOA, DRT, DOA, TPS, and DRT, TPS.
No, that's different from the online thing. The TPS is the one that replaced the POS. I'm sorry. The TPS is basically the transaction processing system, which really replaced the POS. Here we're talking about the online payment services that are we used to have and no longer have, and we're trying to get it back to the taxpayers.
Okay. Thank you.
Any of the senators have any concerns regarding the online services? No? Yeah, again, if we can just be, people want this. We hear it all the time. Everyone's getting more and more familiar with doing everything online. I mean, it's so amazing how when I first got on Facebook years ago, there's hardly anybody on it, and now even Vice Speaker Cruz is starting to really get into it. So, I'm glad we're going to turn this on come January, and I hope that you guys can do everything that you can to get them to
Yes.
expedite it as quickly as possible.
Sure.
I'm still trying to, online service is just, that's separate from the TPS. The online service is separate from the TPS, but is
Correct.
that on? Oh, you're going to be doing that TPS also?
The TPS, I understand,
Yeah,
is
the
is
TPS is already
operating.
on, yes, operating already, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a transaction processing
Yes,
system.
yes.
Yeah. So when the transaction happens in DRT, it's talking to DOA.
Yes.
right?
Yes.
This one, Mr. Vice Speaker, if you look at the attachment, is for the e-filing, the vehicle registration payments, the business license renewal payments, the W-1 e-filing, basically all those tabs on the website that when you go to it says it's not
Yes.
currently operating.
Yeah.
It's gonna basically, I guess, modify the online services for the motor vehicle, the business license, to make them available for online payment.
Now,
And then
these-
also, any time a taxpayer owes the government in taxes, whether it's real property, GRT, they can go in there and pay it online. So
Okay.
that's the biggest part that we were adding is
These were on before, though. I
Correct.
recall. Was it the
Yes.
same vendor that we've sent the PO to that had it on
Yes.
before?
Yes, but
So they should just really be able to turn the modules back on. I
no,
mean,
I'm
just-
so sorry. It's not that simple. I wish it was, and that's what we were asking. Again, we go back to what happened 3 years ago. The POS system went down. There's new players. There's
I
new
see.
vendors. So there's a whole lot of technical issues
I
that they
see.
had to work out.
So the master system's different, and so
Right.
the sub-modules
It's like
have
the
to
foundation
change.
is there,
Yeah,
but they have to rebuild it.
Okay. Well, okay, if you guys can just expedite it, that'd be great.
Okay.
Be good to be able to announce to our people,
Yes.
it's on, finally.
We would love to make that announcement too.
Okay, I'm glad the PO's out. The second item that we wanted to follow up on was the property seizures and the auctioning of real property. Now, since our last hearing, I've done a lot of research on the different types of procedures that other states have. And I compared them to the procedures that we have here. And our procedures are I don't find them to be very, very rigid in terms of leaning more towards protection of the property owner. I find them to be very loose, as a matter of fact. You just send to the last address of record. If it's not getting to them,
Oh, sorry.
I thought that was feedback on the microphone. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So for example, I pulled up the California requirements, and have you guys taken a look at other states, what they do? Like California's, they have day one, you contact the borrower, and they spell out exactly what that entails, and then they go all the way up to day 31, and then day 86 to day 91, day 116 to 121, day 105, day 111, day 135, day 141. I mean, it's basically actual timelines and what needs to happen within those timelines, and it's a whole list of different things that have to be done. Do we have something like that? Because I remember the Vice Speaker was asking for the administrative rules and regulations that spelled that out, and it was found that there were none. Do you guys actually have a procedure in place for how we even initiate this process, and is it a duly adopted due process so that if it isn't followed, the property owner will be able to find some kind of relief, saying, hey, you're supposed to have mailed this to me and you didn't, so.
And that's basically what we were talking earlier. There's a lot of timelines that we have to meet on the real property. We want to make sure that we send out the billings, and basically, again, for the delinquent taxpayers, we need to actually send out a particular notice and a certain date, and also for the a second notice the following year on a certain date, and also to follow with a certified 90-day letter. We follow those things in order. It's within the law, but there was a short procedure that was issued by the AG's office way back, and when we look at that procedure, our staff, we said, and our legal counsel, looked at it and they said, we want to update those procedures. So that is where we're at right now. And for my legal counsel who left us last week, I guess, told us that it's under review with the agent and we should be getting it within a week or two. So it's under review, and it's a guideline that was established by the AG's office. Procedures to be followed on basically under that particular law that would allow the government to seize the property and auction it. And I think that the statute mentions two different ways. One is to basically offer the adjacent owners, and for example, right now we have some people that are interested. They did the research. They found some lands that been abandoned for so many years. They can't make contact. That's something that's one of the ways that we can work with the taxpayers' property. The other one is to auction it. So I haven't seen the revised procedure set by the AG's office, but we will be getting it pretty soon.
Senator Adam.
Was there any kind of a public hearing on these procedures? I mean, do these procedures have to go through the AAA process? You hold public hearings, you guys put your findings together, it gets sent up to the governor's office for his approval or disapproval, and then it gets sent down here.
I know you're talking about adopting regulations and procedures.
Yeah.
I don't recall if that went to that process, but I did talk to our legal counsel before he left, but it didn't mention anything, and I don't know if there's going to be some procedure there about developing, but in the long run, I guess he did recommend that we should look into establish something like California. But the law is very, very straightforward when it talks about actually after you've gone through the procedure, you have listed all the properties every year, you have issued a 90-day, and after that, after the 90-day, the law is basically that you deed the property over to the government of Guam. It's in the law. It's very simple. So like I said in my previous oversight, we've been doing that in the past, but we've never actually taken the step where it says you may auction these properties. So what's happening now is that if those properties that were actually deeded to the government, if the owners comes in and says, Department of Revenue and Taxation, here's my $10,000, I'm going to pay everything that I owe the government, then what we do is we cancel the deed and give it back to the property owner. So that's basically what's been going on for years. So what we're looking at right now is the possibility of looking at some of these properties to basically start maybe with those corporations that are defunct, are no longer here. We're looking at the amount that how much they owe, and like for example, this person that's interested in buying, where we got a letter. And those are the things that we're looking at right now.
I think though that just zeroing in like a laser beam, as is the one of the real qualities of my vice chairman, the question was, with respect to the auctions, have those been adopted as per the AAA process, the Administrative Adjudication Act, as an official regulation or rule that the department has to follow before it's able to move forward with that process? Are those regulations being adopted according to the AAA?
Basically, like I said earlier, I don't recall that process where the AG established the procedures. It going, I may be wrong, but I don't know if it's not on the regulations, then I don't think it went through.
Yeah, and so I mean, if we have to go through AAA when it comes to raising a fee, like for example, firearms licensing fees, if those need to go through AAA, surely the process of taking somebody's property and selling it to somebody else needs to go through AAA, at the very least. I mean, the public. We talk about transparency. We talk about making sure the public's informed of what the process is. I mean, you're basically going to adopt something and no one's going to know exactly how it's going to be affecting them or how they can participate. I mean, basically, if you don't go through AAA, you can technically be adopting an auction process that benefits only a few in this community who will be able to take advantage of it. Now, if we do follow the AAA, then everybody can come in and offer their input and say, hey, you know what? The process that you're going about is only going to allow certain people to participate. Maybe you should go about doing it this way. That's the reason why we have the whole AAA process, to be able to allow the community to have the opportunity to be able to afford their input and to safeguard against us adopting rules or regulations or implementing policies and procedures that affect the community in a way that's going to be unfair or unjust in how it's applied.
And that's basically true, but when we look, like I said earlier, when we look at the statute, it's very straightforward. It didn't say that if you go through the process of auctioning property, you have to do this, from 1 day to 30 days, from 31 days to 90 days, from 91 days to 100. It didn't say. There's no statute that says that. And maybe this is something that maybe we should look into.
Exactly.
But if we were to do a regulation, it'd be based on something that is not there, because the statute basically only says that you notify the taxpayer by June 8 that they're delinquent on any public newspaper or newspaper. And then on the following year, if they're still delinquent, you need to notify again. That's the procedure on deeding the property. And after that, you send a letter, a certified letter to the owner. And 90 days, again, the taxpayer doesn't come in and says, here's my money. The law says deed it over to the government, and it's in there. It's deeded over to. Maybe that's what we need to do is revamp the seizure procedure and says, after this 90-day, we're gonna from day like you said, California, from day 1 to 30 days, this would happen. From 31 days, but there's really nothing to look at.
Yeah, and so and the reason why we're having this discussion is I would hope that the perspective of the department would be to sit here and say, Senator, we need to straighten out these laws because they're too straightforward and they don't afford enough protections to our property owners. But the opposite is being said. What you guys are saying is, oh, Senator, the laws are straightforward. We're going to keep doing this until the laws change. And so on our side now, we're having to put on the hat of consumer protection almost and say, wait a minute, why are you guys just plowing ahead, moving forward with a process where even the auction part of it hasn't even been properly codified? And we're having to say maybe we should be the ones to step back and make this more consumer protected oriented versus the streamlined process that you guys are continuing down.
And maybe what I would recommend is that we once we get the AG's updated procedures for these things, we'll share these procedures with you and see. I haven't seen it, so I heard that it's very detailed and it's very informative. And
but these procedures are not being adopted according to the process.
That's basically, yes, that's what I'm saying. But it's issued by the AG's office. So
are they a draft that we're just going to look at before it goes to AAA? I mean, I don't quite understand how we're going to be able to implement something like this outside of the mandate to the Administrative Adjudication Act.
Normally, when we ask the AGs for guidelines and procedures, they normally, on a particular law, they normally would draft maybe the word is an opinion or a guideline. I think it's the word guideline and information. So from that guideline, we look at that. And you pick, I haven't seen it yet, but normally it would give us the information and guidelines in that particular statute that you have to follow in order for you to basically implement that statute.
And my concern the last time, John, when I asked about whether or not it went through the AAA, was the fact that you kept saying, we're not going to auction off all the property. And I jokingly said, whose property are you going to auction off? You're not going to auction off mine, but you're going to auction off mine. And the very next day, the governor came out when people were wondering whether or not San Maria was going to lose her property, and said, "Oh no, we're not doing the private landowners. We're just doing the corporations." And now today you're saying we're going to do the corporations that are defunct. What's the definition of defunct? Which one are you going to say? There's got to be, and I think, I think just take it from us that we're telling you in as politely as we can say it, do it under the AAA. Don't try anything without going through the AAA.
And like I said earlier, we're going to wait for the AG's information and guideline, and we'll discuss from with our legal counsel, which is probably the AG now because our legal counsel left us. So, like in the last discussion, if we have to go to the triple process, then we'll go to the AAA process. That's what I said last time.
Yeah, just to my understanding, AAA is not it's not an option when it comes to adopting a rule or regulation within a department. You guys are going to have, that affects the community, you're going to have to go through that AAA process.
Yeah.
So, and the reason why the Vice Speaker, he's absolutely right, we're being very polite in our assertion that we go through the AAA process. Because if you don't, I'm going to file an injunction to halt the whole thing because it's violating the AAA process. And I don't want to have to do that. So please go through the AAA process when adopting this because it affects the community and their input is important as it relates to how this whole thing is gonna proceed from A to Z. And in the meantime, as we go into budget session, and since we've been discussing this, I'm hoping to work with my colleagues. We're going to take another closer look at the whole process and see whether or not we need to be instead angling more towards something that's been adopted in California, where it's very, very rigorous in the expectations of the department to communicate with the property owner and to track that communication, whether it's by mail or by telephone. And that way the property owner has a very clear due process, so that in the event that they want to challenge the property seizure for whatever reason, both the agency and the property owner are able to look at the playing field and say, well, I followed my rules, or no, you didn't.
Yes.
And in the court of law, it's all going to boil down to what we've codified, whether or not it was properly codified, whether or not it was codified according to the law, and then whether or not it was properly administered.
Right.
So,
right. No, we agree. Of course, we have to do our due diligence, and hopefully, like John keeps mentioning, we'll wait for the AG. We'll bring it up with you. We can discuss this, and more than likely, they're going to say the same thing. We have to do the AAA, and then absolutely, we will do the AAA process because we want to notify. We want everyone out there to know exactly every step that we take and what your remedies are, or what we can do to help you also.
okay, great. Thank you. And if we can just get a response from the AG as quickly as possible on that,
Yes.
on whether or not they're going to recommend the AAA, which I'm sure they will.
Right.
But that way we can communicate. We got to keep updating the public.
Yes.
They need to know exactly what's going on here, and we need to keep them informed. Do any of my other senators have any questions on this one? Senator Yamashita? Okay. So as of right now, just to clarify, with respect to property auctions, nothing's happening.
Right.
And nothing's projected to happen in the near future because nothing has been provided by the Attorney General as far as guidance is concerned on how to proceed.
Correct.
So we're not talking even about implementing anything. We're just talking about first getting guidance from the Attorney General.
Yes.
Okay. So we're just going to stay on top of that. If you can please keep me informed as to any communication from the Attorney General's office, and we'll follow up with them as well.
Okay.
Sure. Thank you. Lastly, on the gross receipts taxes. Oh, I'm sorry. Vice Speaker Cruz.
On the real property, did they finish the reassessment, reappraisal?
No, the revaluation.
It's still ongoing. We met yesterday and we discussed where they're at.
And where are they?
They're still looking at possibility of getting it done by August 30. If not, then we just have to see where they're at. I mean, that's the goal, is August 30.
If they don't finish by August 30, we won't be able to include that in this year's budget, will we?
Well, this is something that I wanted to discuss with the senator on his bill, that he wanted to extend the deadline for the exemptions, and in our, I believe, if not mistaken, we asked that those dates be like I think the appeals date would be extended also. as far as because if you want to extend the exemptions to December 31st, everything has to change because you're giving more people ample time to come in and afford them the opportunity of getting the exemptions.
No, what I'm talking about, John, is this current fiscal year, DOE is short because we overstated TEFF, right?
Yes, yes.
And next year's projection for TEFF is contingent on this new appraisal, correct?
Correct, yes.
And if we don't finish by August the 30th, which will then give the Equalization Board the month of September or in October to review and conduct hearings, so that in November you can issue the property taxes in February or later on in the year, December or January. We will again have over-projected TEFF, wouldn't we?
Basically, if we don't use the revaluation, yes, but we're still basically looking at meeting those deadlines, and if possible, I think if the days are extended, it would afford more people ample time to appeal. In other words, if the extended date for the exemption is extended, we would ask also that the appeals days will be extended because you're extending deadlines.
I understand, but my colleagues are asking for a copy of the budget, like immediately. But I can't say the TEFF number that I have is solid because we know this last year it was soft and it was short. And to appropriate what you guys are projecting, because we're using your projection for TEFF with the new reevaluation.
Yes,
Like
I said, our plan is still to include this revaluation for 2014. Yes, that's still our goal. What I was asking earlier is that if you're going to extend the exemption deadline to December 31st, I'm also asking that you move also some of those, because it's only natural that you move and you give more people time to basically appeal.
Yes, you guys are talking about two separate things, but they're both kind of related. What the Vice Speaker is basically asking is if this revaluation isn't done by August 30th, actually August 30th is a little late because we're supposed to pass a budget by then. His question is, if the revaluation is not complete, we won't have a firm number on how much more in property taxes we're going to bring in. And without that firm number, what number are we supposed to use when we budget? Are we just going to go with the hypothetical number that you guys have provided for us on the property tax assumptions? But that same hypothetical number was what we based last year's budget on, and it was short. So the Vice Speaker has a very legitimate concern as to exactly what property tax number should we go with. Should we go with the revaluation number, which is a very, very elevated number? Should we go with the non-revaluation number, which is much lower? Or should we go with a number that kind of puts a risk discount into the revaluation? Because the revaluation could come in lower. I mean, worst case scenario, we're all hoping it comes in higher. Or it could come in lower than what everyone's hoping it's going to come in at, as far as hoping concerning revenue. So his question is, what number do we use for property taxes? The revaluation number assumption that you guys provided, or something more conservative?
Basically, right now our goal is we're still pursuing the revaluation to be issued for 2014.
Yeah, but that was the goal last year.
I know.
And so that's why we need to, I understand you're pursuing the goal, but what are we going to, all goals aside, what number do we use for the budget?
As planned, we're still looking at the revaluation. That's what's going to happen moving forward.
So if we do this budget and we say the budget of the Department of Revenue and Taxation is going to be contingent upon the revaluation, you're going to be okay with that. And if the revaluation comes in short, then DRT gets cut. We good to go on that?
Rather than use TEF money for GDOE, we'll use TAF money,
For DRT.
For DRT. And if it doesn't come in, then you have no money. Because that's what's happening with
That's
what
the gravity of
governor's
the
doing right now.
situation.
He's saying the legislature overestimated the TEFF, but we were utilizing your numbers that you told us was going to happen. That never happened.
That is, something
So-
that we can't control. But
Yes, we're going to stick to our number.
Okay. So we may very well do that. I mean, one of the things that Vice Speaker and I are really working on this budget is we're really trying to figure out new ways to make sure that health, education, and public safety get everything that they need to get to operate. And when DOE comes to us in June or May and says we're short $7 million, you look at that and you're like, what can we do? And so sometimes it gets to the point where we need to say to ourselves, okay, who came up with the number and why did it come up short? And how can we make sure that we're not going to be having those kind of overestimations going forward? And maybe one of the easiest ways we can do that is the entity that's responsible for providing that projected figure will also be the one responsible for operating based on those projections. So if you guys are going to stand firm behind the TEFF number, as chairman, I'm going to say that I'm going to be okay sitting down with the vice speaker and saying, let's maybe reconstruct this budget so that all of DRT is operating on that TEFF number.
And again, I want to just make this statement that when we do estimate, we do estimates. I did say in the event that nothing really counts until the revaluation is done. And you just said some may go down, some may go up, and I think that's what's going to happen on this revaluation. Is some properties are going to go up, some are going to go down. But the aggregate outcome of this is we estimated it to be at $7 million that we all agreed. But estimations is estimation. It could be less, it could be more. We don't know until the actual product is done. That's what I want to comment on.
I understand, John, but neither one of you came to the defense of the legislation when Adelup was beating us over the head saying GDOE did not get all of its money for TEFF because the legislature overestimated it. But we were taking your number. And the two of you were mute.
And it didn't happen. The revaluation didn't happen last year, so we're pushing that we're gonna make it happen this year. And the fact is that this delinquent thing that we're really going out on publishing it's really bringing in a lot of revenues compared to previous years, because people now are coming in and paying their property taxes, and I've seen the numbers go up as compared to the previous year. So we're helping in that way to try and patch the gap between what was on the budget and what's been collected by collecting a lot of these back taxes that's been owed to the government for so many years.
Okay, Vice Speaker. Okay, we'll figure it out. On the issue of the gross receipts taxes, now I know we talked about in the last oversight hearing about the $40,000 threshold when you pass it in one given fiscal year or calendar year. I'm sorry, it was discovered that you guys automatically begin assessing the GRT in the next calendar year because they've already passed it in the previous calendar year.
That's basically how we look at the statute. It's every year stands on its own. So in other words, the threshold every year is being tested. So what we're saying here is that if you qualify this year, let's say I give you an example for retail, and last year you only made, for example, 45,000, and then this year you take the first 40,000. But let's say this year I made a lot of businesses. My sales went up, and I ended up making this year $60,000, for example. So next year you look at the look back year and you look at say, wait a minute, I made $60,000 last year, so for 2015 I no longer eligible for the De Santos. That's how we look at it, and it says every year. You look at it, and that's something that we've been doing for many years.
Yeah, and I see where you're coming from, and we even did our research, and we can kind of see how your logic deduces to that. My concern is that in the spirit of the law, the spirit of the Dave Santos Amendment was it's a small business exemption, which is meant to encourage small businesses to be able to grow. And so what it does is it allows for a certain threshold of their income to not have to pay GRT. But what's happening is, let's say I made $60,000, and I'm automatically going to be paying GRT next year on the first dollar that comes in because I made $60,000 last year. That becomes a disincentive for the business to make more than the threshold, because their next immediate dollar is going to get taxed at GRT rates. So if I'm in business and I'm making 40 grand a year and I have an opportunity to make another 10,000, I might not want to make that extra 10,000 because then I'm going to be paying GRT on my first dollar next year. You get what I'm saying? The spirit of the law and the reason why it was drafted was to encourage small businesses to be able to have a tax break so that they can, once they grow, pay taxes thereafter. But it's not meant to say, stay under 40,000 and don't go after new business because you're going to get penalized going into the next year. Do you guys follow what I'm saying? If a business has a banner year and they make over the exempted amount, they're going to suffer for that next year, even if they make far below the exempted amount. So we need to look at that and maybe work on fixing that.
What you're basically looking at is that you don't really require a threshold amount.
No, I think we should have a threshold amount, but I believe that it should reset every calendar year. So for example, January to December, I made $40,000. I don't pay any GRT. January to December of the next year, I made $60,000, so I paid GRT on the additional 20. January of next year, I start all over again. My first 40,000, I don't pay any GRT. If I make 60 again January that next year, then that 20,000 should again get the GRT tag. But the way you're doing it is if I make $40,000 this year, $60,000 the next year, and then $40,000 the year after that, because I made $60,000 in that middle year, I'm paying GRT on my first 40 on the third year.
But remember, the following year you get the exemption because you only made 40. So in other words, if you don't have a threshold, then remember it started with like 1,200. Then somebody defined small business as $500,000 way back, I think in the 70s. It says almost everybody qualified because $500,000 was the threshold amount. So we were losing a lot of base revenue on GRT, so they brought it down again to certain 250,000, I think. Then further down, and now we're down at 50,000. So, in other words, if there's no yearly threshold amount, then it's very hard to control what is expected of the tax rate to take the exemption on, and it's only the first 40,000 because there's an aggregate. So you can the aggregate is basically limiting the loss of the government. In other words, you can qualify for as many as business as you want as a small business, but you're only entitled to 50,000. So that's how we've been doing it. But if you want to change the rules, we need to look at it, because we even did the regulations back then, I believe, or some kind of when Dave Santos was first adopted, we did some regulation that spells out what the rules are. It's always based on that calendar year and the look back year. So some years you can qualify, some you don't. Like what you were saying earlier, where you made 40, then you qualify, but this year you make 60, but you said the other year you make 40. So, but this year you probably take not take the exemption because you made over 50, but you only make 40 this year, so next year you take again the exemptions. That's how we're looking at it.
Yeah, but see, and that's my whole point, though. It becomes a disincentive for businesses to grow beyond 40. It scares them away from passing that $40,000 threshold. Because if I made 40 in year 1, 60 in year 2, and 40 in year 3, and all of my 40 in year 3 is subject to GRT, I should have just maybe not taken that extra $20,000 in year 2. Because that way it would keep me from crossing that threshold. Now, maybe $20,000 is a bit high, but let's say I made 40 in year 1 and I made 50 in year 2 and then 40 in year 3. All of my 40 in year 3 is being assessed GRT, even though I'm within the Dave Santos exemption, all because I made more in my second year. And so I think that the spirit of the law is intended so that if you pass 40 in any calendar year, then you pay GRT on every dollar thereafter. But every year should be a new year. And we're having our people file GRT monthly, so shouldn't we be able to keep track of that? I mean, why would we even bother with this look-back period? I can probably see it with a quarterly GRT reporting, because we're going to have to make assumptions over the 3 months that aren't being reported until the report actually comes in. But now that we have GRT reported on a monthly basis, we should be able to track it in real time and say, okay, you've passed your threshold, now you pay your GRT, and then come January, your threshold starts all over again. Senator Ed, I think you had a question.
I don't understand why we don't use like a rolling 3-year average. Or, I mean, granted, like for example, I start up my business this year, and I'm probably not gonna. I'll probably bring in 10,000. Next year, things finally settle down. I'm gonna make 50,000, but the average income for those 2 years would only be about 30,000. So with 50,000. I mean, so if we do that rolling average, and I think that kind of recognizes the fact that things click this year, next year, who knows what the economic conditions would be. So is there any reason why that a 3-year rolling average, 3, 4, whatever, however many, but a rolling average is not used?
Because the way we look at the statute, the way it was written, it says annually. You look at the most recent year. So when you read the statute, it says annually, and you look at the most recent year. The most recent year is normally your past year, and if you just a new business automatically gets the first 40,000 because the most recent year is 0. I mean, if I'm a big store and I'm gonna make I have $1 million, and I'm gonna on 1 year, and I start my business today, the law says annually you look at the most recent year. I didn't have a business last year. I'm starting it, but I'll get the first 40,000 because I had less than 50,000 last year. Okay. So that's how we're looking at annually. The following again, it says you look at the most recent year. Annually, you look at the most recent year. It's the way it was written.
Okay, so I understand then. I mean, basically, you're just following the law.
Yeah.
And the law says you look at the most recent year, but I guess. So I guess here's a situation where somebody really needs to take a look at the law and see whether it makes sense to just say, regardless of what happened last year, maybe I'm in a boom year, and then we get hit with a big typhoon this following year or whatever. Maybe we really need to take a look at a rolling average. So I guess that is something that is to be left probably to the legislature to consider.
In other words, and I seen other exemptions from our neighboring territories. I believe like the Virgin Islands, they just give everybody the first 10,000, the first 20,000. I don't know what the amount is, and it doesn't really apply whether they're small or not. So it's just the first $20,000 of your gross income is exempt from GRT, which applies to everybody. That's if you're looking at that, or you can do whatever. I remember the threshold of that $500,000 where almost everybody, a lot of the businesses qualified, because you always look at the most recent years, and if you made less than $500,000 last year, you still get the at that time it was I think 50,000 exemptions, but. Now it's down to 40, so you can make the change if you want to make it applicable for every year to the small businesses, and it's not governed by the most recent year, because that's the key word that it says annually you look at the most recent year, and that's how we're looking at it, and I think that's how the regulation was written. Is that you always look at the most recent year as your threshold, and then and the aggregate has always been 50,000. I think it's never been changed. So a person will be entitled only to 50,000 a year, whether he qualifies for 1, 2, 3, or 4 businesses.
Vice Speaker.
So you have confirmed that the information that I had received, that someone can have several corporations, all making less than 40,000, could avoid the GRT.
if every corporation is incorporated and establishes a business, I think it will probably work. I just got to look at the relationship, if whether this person is also the owner of all these 10 corporations. So ownership can be one taxpayer. So I really need to look at that. That's the thing that I ask my staff to look at, whether if I'm the same shareholder for all the 10 corporations, would that make a difference? Because now your intent is to try and limit your businesses to a point that you're trying to get away from paying taxes. Okay. So that's something that we're looking at.
I'm just saying that my information from people that work and have worked there is that this ploy hasn't been used. I mean, has and is being used to avoid the GRT. How they report it in their income tax is completely different. But I'm just saying, as far as GRT is concerned, that I have information that there are people that have divided up the 10 apartments that they own around the island under 10 different corporations, and none of them are paying GRT. Whether or not they report the combined income of the 10 under themselves, or if they just pay corporate taxes for each of those without filing an income tax, because they pay themselves from it rather than the corporation, and they don't claim all the 36,000 as their income. It's the 36,000 that belongs to that corporation and is being used to pay the mortgage payment, doing all the kind of stuff that's in, but it's separate, and they're not claiming it for themselves. That's just, and I'm hoping that you can confirm it. The other thing is that when you talk about I also received information that not everybody files monthly. In fact, some of the problems that you'll have last month is people come in to renew their license, and they're told, you cannot renew your license because you have not filed your gross receipts. And the answer, as I understand it, from the people that work up there, is the response is, but I wasn't going to make more than $40,000 anyway, so I didn't file monthly. And all I made was $2,500 a month, and it comes out to $30,000. I was going to get an exemption anyway, so why bother with the monthly? And they're made then go and file each one of the the last 11 months, but people are not filing on a monthly basis. Is that correct?
I have to look into that, but you're correct. They have to file. The law requires them to file whether it's taxed or not. I mean, that's the law.
I understand, but I'm just saying that is the law.
Yes.
But I'm just saying that my information is that there are lots of people that are not filing monthly because they believe that they're not going to make more than 40 anyway, and so they don't need to. They're not going to have to end up paying gross receipts tax, and so they don't bother with the monthly payments. Monthly filing.
It's true that they won't be able to pay any in taxes, but the required filing is still there. It's still required, and we will enforce that. I guess go back.
I understand that before they get their license renewed, but I'm just saying there is no trying to get it on the record that, and I think.
Yes, I have heard the same thing where some taxpayers, not a lot, but there are a number out there that are below the threshold, so therefore they don't file, but every year they come in and file January to February so they can get their license renewed. And we do have to put a stop to that type of practice because they're required.
Way back, I think there was a senator that wanted to do amendments to the GRT law, and I did recommend, the senator at that time to restate the failure to file penalty, because this would really fix the problem. Because if you impose a failure to file penalty, these people are going to come in and file.
That's
the incentive of them not filing is really nothing, because there's nothing owed. And that's why they don't know it. But we do tell them that they have to come in and make sure that they file January to December before they get their license, and there's no impact for really them not filing because there's no penalty. But when I asked the senator to reinstate that, because back then there was a penalty for failure to file, to force these people, so that way we know really what the gross revenue every month, moving forward. We didn't get into that point where they reinstate the failure to pay. But if you really want to look into it and say that if you don't come in, there'll be like $100 penalty, they'll probably come in and file and claim that they made, for example, $1,000 for that particular month.
Why? Well, I'm trying to follow the logic here, though, because why would you require someone to file if they already know that they are below the threshold? I think that the penalty is the failure to renew your business license. If you don't file over the 12 months or whatever, if you don't file your GRT and you want to renew your business license come June, then you don't get it. Even if you were under the threshold, you still don't get your business license for failure to file. But what benefit is there for people to have to require people to file every single month, even if they already know that they're below the threshold? Because we're only talking about GRT.
Because those people, you can track the revenue.
To report the income.
If they don't report it, then there's nothing to track. So let's say, for example, if we don't require these people to report what they make, let's say 39,000 or 38,000, whatever that amount is, we're not seeing it on the gross receipts. But
we wouldn't see the 38,000 on the gross receipts.
No. There won't be any tax, but you see it on the gross receipt reported. In other words, when you file your return, you go to gross receipt, exemption, and taxable. So when you report it, you're going to say $1,000 for the gross receipt, 1,000, for example, exempt, and taxable will be 0. But when we run the report, we capture those information. So that's why, and the law requires that every business that is doing business on Guam must file a GRT return. So whether it's taxable or not, they have to.
And if they don't, and they come in June, you allow them to...
No, that's where they've stopped that this year.
They file the returns.
No, you don't. No, but if they fail to file, you don't allow them to renew.
First thing, what would happen?
They don't file,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But what happens is that they file all 12 months,
Yeah.
and that's why we need to impose that penalty: failure to file. That's the big one. Not a penalty to pay, but failure to file. Because even though it's 0, see, people, there's no incentive for them to file. There's no consequences if they do not file, because it's 0 tax. So there's no consequences. But once we impose the failure to file, that might encourage them to file monthly.
But they can...
I got
They'll bring
cleared
it
by
current.
GRT.
Yes.
And it's just, it's just something that I can't force somebody to file because, I don't know, I don't know the government, so why should I file?
But even the federal government doesn't require you to file your taxes if you make below a certain amount.
No,
And that's why I'm really curious as to why we're talking about requiring people to file when they're making below the taxable amount anyway.
And the other thing...
I'm just worried about us creating an environment where we're causing more bureaucracy for our business owners, our small business owners, that's unnecessary.
No, but here's the thing. How do we know they made below the threshold until you report it?
You'll know at the business license renewal period when they're required to file, otherwise not. And that's why I always come out and say, do not renew business licenses
Right.
if they
Yes,
fail to file.
of course.
And so it's at that point where you'll be able to say, no, you got to file.
Right.
Then when they file everything and you see, oh, you guys went over the threshold, then you assess the taxes and then you assess the
And
penalties.
that's the other thing that I want to say, that they have to come in and file, because once they reach that 40, the $40,001, that $1 has to be taxed. So, let's say he reached on November, he exceeded the 40, so anything over 40 in November would have to be paid. And that's the reason why you have to track it our system will track the number of exemption you claim every time you file. So if you come in January and you have rental income, for example, of let's say $1,200, then you go to this line 37 under rental, $37, and you keep adding that until you reach 40,000. Then it actually will tell you when actually to pay the gross receipts. That's the other important that they have to file.
I'm just worried because it's so interesting. I'm having this discussion because I'm a Democrat, but I'm looking out for the business owner here, and I'm saying if you don't have to pay the tax, we're going to impose upon them the need for them to have to file anyway.
They're required to file.
Yes, they're required to file in order for them to get their business license.
Correct.
Yeah, and so they will file. But for us to say you got to go in there every month, you got to go stand in the lines at Rev and Tax if you don't have online filing. Every month, whether you owe or not, you're going to have to go and file the paperwork anyway.
Right, but we encourage online because they fall under that
Online.
threshold.
Yeah, online.
You can file online.
Okay.
Online is very convenient if you're not paying taxes.
Right.
Just go there
So they can file
and
online.
file it online.
It's very convenient.
Yeah.
Very convenient. But I'm just the idea of requiring, because even like I said, the federal government, and you guys know this, on the income tax side,
Right,
if
there's
you
a
make below
threshold.
$10,000, you don't even need to file any kind of income taxes. So, and the rationale is because they don't tax any income below $10,000. So if we're not taxing any gross receipts below 40, why are we going to inconvenience business owners who know they make below 40 and say, you got to come in and file? If they make more than 40, that's on them. They got to pay it. If they made more than 40 back in November and they have penalties, that's on the taxpayer.
It's the
But that's where we make sure we hold those taxpayers accountable. But we don't punish all the other good taxpayers because they're making below the taxable amount.
It's the tracking mechanism because if you have a business,
But the same logic can
Yeah.
apply to forcing people who make below 10,000 to file income taxes for tracking.
I mean,
But the federal government doesn't do that because they don't tax anything below 10,000.
I mean,
I don't like inundating businesses with the procedures that have no actual monetary consideration to the government.
But and again, one of the things that one of the reasons why I believe that they're required to have, because the tracking mechanism. If you really wanted to know what the gross receipts for any particular month, and you exempt these people that are making 40,000, then you're not really seeing the true gross receipt for any month. And just remember, there's a lot of people that are making less than 40,000. So you're gonna see a group of people, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 of them. I don't know what the number, that not reporting. So you're not really seeing the gross receipt that they generate from their businesses. So that's the reason, one of the reasons why they're required to file, so we can see those. Although there's no really impact to the taxpayer, but we really need those data for our purposes, and to see how much gross receipts are being reported, and what we're also trying to do is, several years back, is we wanted to try and get into those business license and connect them to GRT by categories, where we wanted to start monitoring the retail, the service, and hopefully we can get that for next year. That's what we're looking. So if anybody wanted to know, what's the gross receipt for all the mechanics or the auto shops on Guam, we can generate that report. But right now we don't have that. We started that program several years back and it didn't go through, but now we're trying to basically have the business license together with the GRT, so when you get a quote and you have an auto shop, that you get a quote, and then anytime that we want to print know how many auto shops are doing business on Guam, we can get the number, how much is being reported every year or every month. We can do those things. Those are things that we're looking at and trying to improve our data information. So hopefully we can get that going for next year.
A penalty for non-filing? I don't know. You
I
still
know,
convince me on that.
I know, and I didn't convince the senator that I was talking, but it was there before. Just to let you know, but it's not only meant really to get the people that are not paying taxes because of exemptions, but also to make it have more teeth for the people that are actually paying and not filing on time. That's the other thing. Like for example, income tax. You can be paying. Failure to file is very stiff. I mean, it's 5% per month. Failure to file. If you don't, if you don't have that extension, oops, and it's really 5%. There's a failure to pay penalty. So the intent of the failure to pay is not only geared towards people to come
But
in
that
and
failure
file.
to file penalty on the income tax side is for people who actually owe income tax.
Yes.
So if we have a failure to file penalty for people who owe gross receipts, that's a different story from just having a failure to file penalty for people who don't.
But
Because the
if-
failure to file penalty on the income tax side doesn't apply for people who make less than $10,000
Right.
because they don't have to file.
I know, but what I'm saying, if you're paying taxes and it even forces you to file on time and pay on time, because if you don't file on time, there's that extra penalty that you're going to pay. So it's not only geared towards bringing people in to comply with the exemption, but it's going to make people that are late filers that are paying come and file timely. That's another thing.
So the department supports a failure to file penalty for those who owe GRT and don't file.
What I'm saying is there's more teeth to the enforcement and compliance. Maybe compliance is on taxpayers, whether right now, if I'm going to file my GRT and I owe the government $1,000, if I file late, a failure to pay penalty will kick in. But if you add another failure to file penalty to GRT, it's going to hurt more. And it's going to inform the taxpayer that not only you're going to pay failure to pay, but you're going to get hit by a failure to file again because you didn't file on the 20th. And that's been there before.
And as a matter of fact, in the IRS, the failure to file is even more punitive than the failure to pay.
Yes.
Because they want you to at least file.
Yes.
I mean, you can even file IRS and not pay because you don't have the money,
Correct.
but at least you
Yes.
filed.
Yes.
That way, at least it's on record.
Yeah.
Because right now, and I can see where you're coming from as far as the GRT is concerned. If you owe GRT and you fail to file that you owe,
Yes.
we never know.
Yes, and
We never know that GRT was actually supposed to come in until business license time comes around.
Then they all come in.
Then they all come in, and
Yes.
then we say, "Oh, you didn't pay. Here's your failure to pay penalty, and here's your business license after you pay all of that." But right now we don't have a failure to file penalty for those who owe GRT.
yes, there's not. I mean, before it was there, but they took it out way back.
Okay. Thank you for that. That's very interesting. Senator Yamashita, do you have any other questions? Always a pleasure sitting down with you guys. Our tax policy is always something interesting to me. That will conclude the items that we have here on the agenda. Just to recap, the online services, the PO is out based on the vendor due to the different system that we have. It is going to require 6 months, but now that the PO is out, we're going to be able to, with confidence, say that by January this will be on,
Yes.
and Revenue-Tax is going to be expediting this process as much as possible. With respect to the property tax auctions, we're pending the advice from the AG on whether or not we need to follow AAA. We will not be implementing any procedures until that AAA question has been answered, and nothing will be moving forward from the Department of Revenue and Taxation until both the AAA question and those procedures have at least surfaced, and we're able to render those answers.
Can we clarify that and
Sure.
just stick to, we won't move forward with the auction, absolutely not, until we get the guidance from the AG's office and follow through with the AAA if necessary.
Yes, there will be no auctioning of anything
Correct.
until that's clarified
Yes.
and until the process is out there. And on the third issue of gross receipts taxes, we have determined that if you reach the exemption amount on the Dave Santos Amendment in 1 year, your first dollar of the following year will be assessed GRT, And if we're going to clarify that, that's going to require the legislature to come back in and clarify that legislatively. So DRT is going to continue to maintain that policy until we do something here at the legislature. What was also brought up was there is no failure to file penalty on GRT people, on those individuals who owe GRT. And so when business license time comes around, that's really the only thing that is the gatekeeper for GRT, basically. If you want your business license, you need to file all of your GRTs. If you turn in all of your GRTs at that date and you owe, you will pay a penalty for failure to pay, but there is no penalty for failure to file. So that's something that we need to consider also. But if we were to assess that kind of a penalty, it would also require legislation here on our side. Okay. Thank you guys for showing up and for being very open about where these things are. Always good chatting with the Department of Revenue and Taxation and talking about the progress that we're making. I will say that I haven't been seeing any Facebook posts about long lines. So a lot of people are really happy. I will also say, though, that when I was looking through the budget request for this year, there's a the amount for telephone services for DRT reminded me about our telephone system up at the department. So if we can just make sure that that's still being spot checked, especially now that we're in this whole conversation about properties and seizures. If people have any questions, I want them to be able to get in touch with you guys.
Yes.
Yeah. But thank you all very much for coming. We'll go ahead and adjourn this oversight hearing at 11:15 this morning. Thanks, Marie, and thank you, John.
Thank you.
So yeah, take a look at